Um, I have done a little bit of that, but definitely not enough to be able to like pick up a kidney and say, oh, this one's heavy. Um, I do external exams at the scene. And so in terms of my familiarity with the human body, it's like I absolutely have a specimen. It's called my body, you know? And so it's like, after doing enough external exams that, this feels like swelling here, or, these ankles are swollen, or, you palp a stomach and you can feel someone's liver. It's stuff like that I can do, as opposed to like holding a human heart and saying, this is clearly, 300 grams as opposed to 150. I couldn't do that. And I imagine there are probably some people who can, but I am not one of them. Do I have an organ in a jar? And the funny thing is I actually had to think about that for a second, because I was like, do I? I have because all kinds of weird shit shows up at your house when you do this job. Not at the moment. It is not uncommon. Like I said, yeah. I mean, I'm on shift for 48 hours at a time. And so if I have just been to a scene and it's 3:00 in the morning and I've just drawn blood and urine for toxicology, I want to go home and sleep. I will absolutely put the blood and urine tubes into my refrigerator next to the salad dressing and sriracha.
So, fun fact down the Carmen timeline. Fun fact down the Carmen timeline for you guys. My first job out of phlebotomy school was I did the home exams for a life insurance company, and I would have to take blood and urine samples from them. And I worked on commission, so I would like book as many possible exams as I could in a day. And so I would get home after like 10, 12-hour days that I, had booked myself, but I would have all these blood and urine that I would have to like spin down in my own centrifuge I had and everything. But my mom would get so pissed because I would put the blood and urine in the fridge with like our groceries.
Yep.
You gotta store it.
It's gotta stay cold. Yeah.
You can't just throw away your sample.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to bring home bones, because those have to go into the state office for the state forensic anthropologist. And so sometimes I'll have like a literal bag of bones sitting in the house. I have to be careful to keep them away from my dogs. True story.
Oh my God.
Yeah. My dogs ate my homework once. It was not cool.
Fucking job hazards you don't consider when taking a job.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is the bones that they chewed on were not human. I was just bringing them in as a curiosity to the state forensic pathologist. But yeah, it was not great.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All right. To repeat another question that I asked in that big block, how often do you guys use scientific specimens or like anatomical models? I know that you said that you don't do autopsies, so we covered that in the beginning and we keep touching on it. But like in general, do you possibly know? Like, I'm sure you've attended and observed many an autopsy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
not many. I mean, by the time pathologists become board certified pathologists, they don't need them.
I guess that's fair. You don't want a doctor referring back to a textbook. So
yeah,
I guess that answers that question for Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, they all have obviously it's impossible for them to know everything, but I think a board certified pathologist can, they'll look at tissue slides and be like, okay, that's abnormal. And they can absolutely, look at, a liver or, a heart or a kidney and be able to say, you know, this is abnormal because of this, you know, because it's like, that's what they're trained to do. That's what they go to 14 years of school for. Interesting story. Once I had not the chief forensic pathologist we have now, but the one before him. She recently retired, and I was helping with an autopsy. And it was funny. She was showing me, she was slicing up a liver. And she was like, look at this. And she was showing me how the blood was beating on the knife as she cut the liver into like slices to look for like tumors or, you know, abnormalities. And she could tell that this person had it's what's called like a fatty liver. She could tell the pathology of the liver by looking at the way the blood was beating on the knife as she cut it.
That is so cool.
Yeah, she was badass.
Yeah, like science for the win. Badass lady scientist. I love it. So, gosh, I'm looking at the time and thinking how many more questions I have for you, and thinking I could talk to you for hours. But I'm going to ask you one more before we wrap, and that's
okay. We can hit this again some other time because this is super fun. I love talking about my job.
Fun. Well, Casey wants to talk to you so bad, so we'll definitely have to do this again. But I got to ask, as of right now, like, what's the current most interesting, unnatural death you've attended to? Like, I know you can't tell us if you've been on big cases, but you got any weird causes of death you've attended to, or weird scenes, or?
You know, there's always all kinds of like 1 in a million sort of disease processes that, you know, it's like this person's dead. We don't know why. They go to the state medical examiner's office for an autopsy, and the doctor comes back and says, it's like this bizarre, you know, disease that happens to like 1 in 15 million people. And you're just like, holy shit. But probably the weirdest death that I ever went on was an accidental crucifixion.
How in
let me explain.
How in the fuck?
So here's the thing is, this person in like the setup is pretty long, and I don't want to like bend your ear with all of it. But this person basically was in a situation in which they slipped as they were fiddling around like in the rafters of a building.
I was going to say it was a sex thing, wasn't it? But
No, not at all.
I am surprised.
And this person's arm was wrapped in a length of cord.
No.
And so what happened is they were basically suspended by one arm from this length of cord about, I want to say they were maybe like 10 feet from the ceiling and about 8 feet from the ground. So they were fully suspended. And they couldn't unwrap themselves from the cord. And so it's like they were just hanging there by one arm.
Oh my God.
For hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Now, the thing is, the pathophysiology behind crucifixion is actually suffocation. Because, you know, whenever you see like these depictions of like Jesus being crucified, it shows that at his feet, you know, he's got like this little stand, you know, like this little pedestal that he's kind of, you know, propped up on.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a thing. And what happens in crucifixion is actually exhaustion of the respiratory muscles. And, you know, it's like they're hanging there for so long that their capacity to actually maintain their posture and like the diaphragm, you know, expands downward in order to create a negative pressure gradient that draws air into the lungs. And when you are suspended like that, you know, with your arms out and, you know, or over your head, what happens is basically your diaphragm and all of your intercostal muscles fatigue to the point that they just don't work. And so what happens when someone is crucified, there's a lot of trauma that goes along with it. And yes, it's absolutely possible for somebody to die of bleeding out or exsanguination from crucifixion. But more often, those people would actually suffocate. And that's why, the Roman soldiers would come and break people's legs, because that would mean that they were not able to prop themselves up anymore to maintain their posture. And it would make their respiratory muscles fatigue more quickly. And so it's in crucifixion, if somebody wasn't dying fast enough, they would break their legs so that they couldn't prop themselves up anymore and their muscles would fatigue faster. Little bit of trivia there. Very long explanation. Sorry.
That is,
but yeah, what happened
some
was
dark trivia, man.
Yeah. So what happened is this guy, when he slipped and fell, he was basically suspended, with by one arm.
Oh my God.
For something like 13 or 14 hours, I think.
Oh my God.
And so, after all was said and done, we realized that he actually died of suffocation. He died of postural asphyxia due to the fatigue of his respiratory muscles because of how he was hanging there.
That is literally horrific. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was so bizarre. And we're all just like, this is weird. This is so weird.
That is weird. That would stick with me. That's for freaking sure.
Yeah.
Sorry,
everybody. Be careful. Always do work with a buddy,
Yeah, man. Oh my gosh. Do not climb a ladder without a second person there. Don't do it. Wow. Oh my gosh. And we'll wrap on that note, on that safety dark trivia note. You're
Lord. Welcome.
As a side note on your trivia, so I went to Catholic school from preschool to 8th grade, Catholic private school, and we had to go to mass every Friday. And they had it was one of those churches that had the big iconographies of the Stations of the Cross, and they were these big relief portraits of carved ones of the Stations of the Cross. And I guess that's just a holdover from childhood, that I just assumed that little block that Jesus Christ stood on was real, because it was on the Stations of the Cross. But I'm having an existential crisis right now that was not real.
Yeah, and I mean, from what I understand, and I'm not a biblical scholar, I was raised in a super Christian fundamentalist home, lots of people. My understanding of it, again, so people don't come for me on the internet, is that that's not, that the little standing block was not a thing.
It makes sense that it's not a thing. Again, it's one of those things that just, when you really think about it, makes sense. But I never
they
really
didn't give him a little loincloth. That was also not a thing.
No, that is for the token modesty of the church. Okay,
exactly.
But it's just one of those things that it's obvious if you think about it, but if you don't think about it, it is not obvious. All right, everybody. With that, you want to plug your pluggables again, Grace?
Oh, just if you want to tell me that I'm a weird ass psychopath or whatever,
please don't.
I can be found. Please don't. I mean, I try to be a decent person, and this job will just turn you into a monster. I'm sorry. Anyway, I can be found usually on Instagram or TikTok under Dead Men's Donuts.
All right. And
I also have a blog. I forgot about that. I have a blog. I keep a blog, and I have a book coming out.
Oh, you have a book?
That's all. I do. I do. It's not from a big publisher. It's a small independent publisher.
Who cares?
But yeah,
it's a book. Hell yeah! Congratulations.
Thank you. Dead Men's Donuts from Vinyl Publishing. That's VINYL. Is that right? No, VINAL. Sorry. Vinyl publishing, book Dead Men's Donuts. It's going to be